Good afternoon, and welcome to the HFMA Colorado Chapter Summer Webinar Series. We want to take a moment to first recognize our annual business partners who not only provide financial support to our chapter, but also share their knowledge and expertise through speakers and these presentations. Their support allows us to operate our chapter and bring our members quality education and resources. We hope you will take a look at them first when your organization needs services or support. For today's webinar, we will be using the Q&A box located on the bottom right of your screen. We will monitor the Q&A panel during the presentation, and we'll be answering questions along the way, as well as addressing any remaining questions at the end of the webinar. A link to download the presentation has been provided in the chat, and it will also be sent via email at the conclusion of the webinar. Today's webinar, Navigating Non-Traditional Claims is No Accident, is being provided by one of our platinum sponsors, Continuum. Let's welcome Warren Kloter, VP of Business Development.
Thank you, Jessica. Appreciate that. Go ahead and get this screen shared here. Thank you each one for joining us today. Thankful to be here with you, and appreciate you all taking time out of your day to be able to see a little bit of something that's unique and different, and something that even in today's landscape, questions I've been asked before is why this topic now with COVID. One of the things that has been found is an increase of travel happening, and so HFMA reached out and asked if I would speak, and I'm happy to be here and doing so today. This is the first time that I have done a presentation of this nature where it's all remote. I'm used to giving it in person, and I've done so a few times. So I'm hopeful that we can navigate this together as this is a little bit different format. One of the things I like to do is getting started and just be by way of introduction and getting to know everyone, do a little icebreaker. This will be a little bit different virtually, so hopefully you can bear with me. One of the things I like to do is have you start off by thinking of a number between 2 and 9. You have your number? Now I want you to multiply that number by 9. And you'll end up with a 2-digit number. I want you to add those 2 digits together and subtract 5. Going pretty rapidly through this, I think it's with finance folks, we should be able to come up with our new number. So if it's a 1, it's an A, 2 is a B, 3 is a C, 4 is a D, and so on. So you should have your letter now. I want you to think of the very first country that comes to mind that starts with that letter. Now that you have your country, I want you to think of the last letter in that country's name and think of the first animal that starts with that letter. And now take the last letter of that animal's name and think of the very first color that comes to mind. And right about now, even though we're in multiple different places around the state and even some folks joining us from out of state, the majority of you are wondering how it is that I know you're thinking about orange kangaroos from Denmark. How many of you may we want to respond in that chat box that that is your reality? And hopefully somebody can respond in there as well and let me know if that just blew your mind a little bit. It's a little bit different than when we're in person to be able to have that instant feedback. Hopefully some of you can share that here as we transition. So as Jessica mentioned, make sure that we're advancing here. By way of introduction, my name is Warren Kloter and I am the VP of Business Development here at Continuum. I put this slide up here because I do talk about my family a lot and use them as examples, and so hopefully that's all right. This is my beautiful wife, Christy. Our oldest daughter, Raina, graduated this past weekend, so this is a graduation photo. Avery's right in front of me there. She's going to be a freshman. Asher's going into 5th grade, and Sayla's going into 4th grade. And I like to put them up on the screen because I do use them as examples, and they are the best part about who I am as a person. And so I like to introduce them to every audience that I speak to, especially if I'm traveling like I did last year and speaking with multiple HFMA organizations in other states. They are the best part of who I am, so I like to introduce them to each of you. I had the privilege of marrying my wife a little over 5 years ago, and I went from being a single guy to a husband and father of 4 overnight. And it's been the most amazing and challenging, yet most rewarding and difficult experience of my life. And keeping with the theme of today, there was a little bit of whiplash and learning curve along the way, but I wouldn't trade it for the world. They are the best part of who I am. And if that chaos, go ahead.
It doesn't look like your slides are advancing on this end.
They're not advancing.
I am still seeing your opening slide, not your beautiful family.
Oh, my apologies. Let's go back. Apparently my screen was paused for some reason. Do you see them now?
They are there now. Thanks,
okay.
Warren.
Thank you for correcting me on that, Jessica. So this is my beautiful family. Sorry, my wife Christy and the kids, and so I'm thankful to be able to present that. If that wasn't enough, we decided to foster a dog to help some family friends out. And as you know, those of you that have kids, doing so, you become a dog owner. So this is Mac. He is our 85-pound Labradoodle who thinks he's a lap dog. So that has added to the family fun and chaos. A little bit about Continuum. We started in Colorado when the laws changed here a little over a decade ago through tort reform. We've helped our clients be able to recover over $1 billion in medical claims from auto insurance companies alone. And we are a platinum sponsor, as Jessica mentioned, and thrilled to be able to be presenting today and have enjoyed volunteering here in Colorado for a number of years. So I wanted to go through a couple learning objectives here. We're going to do an overview of these non-traditional MVA claims, the MVA TPL payer types that are associated with these claims and understanding them, the challenges as these claims do present, and the significant impact of patient access. One of the things in all of my travel to multiple different HFMA events, and especially here recently, hearing a lot of conversation about moving from volume to value and bending the cost curve and a lot of those different topics. And one of the things that I really enjoy is looking at claims from a holistic perspective and involving patient access all the way through and showcasing some of the benefits that that does provide in this space of MVA and third-party liability claims. So we were talking through some of those different details. Specifically today, I wanted to call out motor vehicle accident and third-party liability claims. We'll talk about things that are state-specific here to Colorado, walking through how that affects our hospitals here specifically. I know there's some folks from out of state. I do throw in some out-of-state examples as well, because benefits and rules do change based on the state. We'll talk through some of those different areas that are similar and some of those things that are completely unique to Colorado. And my goal today is that you'll leave where you have benefits both personally and professionally from the information shared today. As I talk about motor vehicle accident claims though, one of the things that a lot of times comes to mind is the commercials on TV. You've got Frank Azar, the strong arm, or out on the Western Slope, maybe it's Killian Davis, the Justice for You people. Or down in Colorado Springs and Pueblo, the McDivitt law firm. And they have something with a frog these days for ribbit and McDivitt and making sure you say it right. But really one of the things that I've heard a lot of times, and I'm going to share some of the feedback that I've gotten along the way, specifically last year from Montana and from Utah, giving this presentation to their chapters, is some of the things that people have shared with me as their thoughts with MVA. I know that being remote today, getting that interaction and having those questions come back quickly could have been difficult. So here's a couple of that have been shared. Maybe if I ignore MVA, they'll go away. Or it's just easier if I bill health insurance and let the patient sort it out. Or I'm spending, or my team's spending a lot more time on these than they are any other accounts, and they're just extremely difficult. I just hate them. Or attorneys are a real challenge to deal with when they're talking negotiations. And my goal today is to show you that that doesn't necessarily have to be your reality. So what exactly are we talking about for the claims in MVA TPL today specifically? We're talking car versus car or single vehicle accidents, car versus pedestrian, car versus bike, and whether it's passengers of the vehicles or the bicyclist or pedestrian. Motorcycles, ATVs and dirt bikes, I put that one in here. It's something that a lot of people don't always think about. Yet here in Colorado, that is something that we see, or as I did a presentation in Utah last year as well with Moab, there's a lot of people that four-wheel. And a lot of those rigs cost more than my personal vehicle. And a lot of them we have found do also have MVA coverages as well. Boats, while it's not significant, we do have a number of reservoirs here in Colorado. We do see boating accidents and anything really with motors and the wheels in that MVA side of things. And from a third-party liability, you also include the slip and falls and the product malfunctions as well. And one of the things I mentioned in the opening here as a reason for this presentation now is US travel has seen an increase of between 14 and 24% of MBAs traveling this summer because people have had their travel vacation plans change due to COVID. They're not flying out of the country, and so they're doing more road trips. And so we've actually seen an uptick in motor vehicle accidents because of that, and the travel happening more frequently. Even through COVID and restrictions, people are still getting away. So we're going to talk through what's unique to Colorado. This is taken from CDC. This information is in a nice, pretty graphic. I like how CDC puts this information together. It is unfortunate a little bit that they don't update their website super frequently. So this information is a number of years old. And so I'll add to that information with some specifics for Colorado that have come up since. But as you can see, the economic impact from these accidents is very similar from motorcycle to vehicles, and pedestrians are not too much behind them as well. One of the things as I talk through some of the specifics about accidents, one metric that is used nationally is fatalities. And I bring that up because while it is a morbid thought, it is the reality of these claims. And so that is a metric that is used in quantifying numbers and different details along the way. So I do at least acknowledge that so that I'm not seemingly calloused, because it is a big metric here in MBA Claims. For every person who loses their life from a motor vehicle accident, there are another 8 that were hospitalized and 100 that were treated and released. What does that mean specifically for Colorado? Last year, we had 632 fatalities here in the state. So if you extrapolate that out for the numbers hospitalized and the number of folks that were treated and released, you end up with over 63,200 patients coming through the ED, at least treating and released, and over 5,000 of those ended up being hospitalized. And I bring all that up because that's a significant number here in our state, and talk through some of the impacts that has on your revenue cycle. Before I do, does anybody know the average cost of an ED visit if a patient is simply being treated, observed, and released? They are not hospitalized. I don't know if that Q&A is open and you can respond. We'll play Price is Right rules. So if you want to put in a number, that would be great. Get that to open up. All right, I'm seeing 3,000 to 4,000 is a guess. Anyone else have a guess? Guess, I mean? Well, Pilar, you were pretty close. In fact, right on. The average cost is $3,362 according to CDC. And if the patient is hospitalized, it's $56,600 and change. And I bring that up because as we talk through some of the benefits here specifically to Colorado, that makes a big difference as you look at MVA claims coming through your facility. So I want to talk through the MVA TPL payer types. A lot of times people ask me, why do you say MVA? Why don't you just say third-party liability? And as we walk through some of these different payer types, I hope to be able to present the picture as to why we segment those differently, first party versus third party benefits, and how those two play together in managing a motor vehicle claim. So first is medical payments, or MedPay. MedPay covers all the medical expenses for drivers, passengers, pedestrians as a result of an accident, up to the limits that they have. Personal injury protection, or PIP, covers the same as the above, but also includes lost wages. And some of you may be saying, well, why are we talking about PIP? Colorado is a MedPay state, and that is true. However, we have borders on the east and on the west that are both PIP states, Kansas being PIP, Utah being PIP. To the north and south with Wyoming and New Mexico, those are both MedPay states. So I want to bring a full picture because we do have people traveling, and we do have facilities that are close to those other states, so you may see that more frequently. Those function fairly similarly, but they are different. The liability insurance, or at-fault insurance, that protects the individual from physical and property damage that is caused in the accident. And then you have your uninsured, underinsured motorist, UM/UIM, right? It wouldn't be healthcare if we didn't have an acronym for that. UM/UIM helps to protect you in case someone hits you who doesn't have insurance or has less than enough coverage to be able to cover your medical expenses. Each of those coverages are specific, and it is imperative that you know, based on where your facility is located or facilities are located, which ones of those are in play for your facility. Additionally, then you also have your commercial insurance, United, Cigna, etc., government insurance, Medicare, Medicaid, TRICARE, and self-pay. All of those are different payer types that can and will pay in an MVA account depending on what happens in the specific situation. So wanting to take those payer types and now boil it down to what is really unique to Colorado. Compulsory coverages, 25, 50, 15. Normally I ask what those mean, and if anyone has a guess for that, if you would put that in the chat box, would appreciate that. 25, 50, 15. What does that mean from a minimum coverage perspective here in the state of Colorado? Give it a second for those of you to type it. No takers. All right. Bodily injury, 25,000 per person, 50,000 per accident, and property damage of 15,000. So I'll use my family as an example, right? There's 6 of us. If I'm driving by myself and someone hits me that has minimum coverage, it would be 25,000 per person, 50 per accident. So if I'm by myself, I would have access to $25,000 in that third-party settlement because they have minimum coverages. However, if my whole family was riding with me, and hypothetically, Jessica was texting, I'll pick on Jessica for a second. She was texting and she rear ends us. And now all 6 of us end up in the hospital. It is now $50,000 for the entire vehicle. So that $50,000 is divided amongst the 6 of us, or about $8,300 a person. So that's minimum coverages here in Colorado. Medical payments, or MedPay, is $5,000. I know, Jessica, you would never text and drive. Thanks for chatting that. That's why I said it's a hypothetical situation, because it wouldn't happen. So medical payments is $5,000 here in Colorado. And what's unique to Colorado is through tort reform, that was something that was added in. And there's some benefits to MedPay that I'll walk through. And this is something that will hopefully help you personally and professionally. So it's $5,000 unless you opt out in writing. And the onus is on the insurance company to produce your signature. And if they cannot, you have $5,000 in MedPay. So for example, my wife and I are on the same policy. If they can produce my signature saying I didn't want it, but they don't have hers, then we both have it. because it's the same policy and they don't have signatures of consent from both of us. So the vast majority of folks here in Colorado do have medical payments coverage if they do have auto insurance for that very reason. Uninsured, underinsured motorists coverage, or UMUIM, and that is $25,000 here in the state. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about MedPay and then go into some details of UMUIM and what's important here. So we'll go back for a second to the MedPay. And that is this. One thing that's unique in Colorado is how that MedPay benefit works. So we'll go back to the example of Jessica and my family, okay? We were not at fault. We end up going in and we have that $3,362 average bill, if you will. When we submit that through our MedPay, for me it's Allstate, okay? And say we were treating at Spanish Peaks Hospital. Spanish Peaks bills that claim out, it goes to Allstate. They pay $3,362 times 6. Again, this is hypothetical. Okay, they pay that full amount out. Well, then when I go to have a claim against Jessica as the third party because she was at fault for the accident, that $3,362, since Spanish Peaks has already been paid by my insurance, where does that money go? It goes right into my pocket. That's something that is very unique to Colorado, okay? So for me and my family, I want to take care of those that are under my roof, that are in my control. And when their dad chose to walk out when Selah was born, he also decided that he didn't want to be involved to a certain level. And so one of the things that I want to do is take care of those kids and my family. So I upped my medical payments to $25,000 per person. Like, well, Warren, why would you do that? Because you have health insurance. Well, the kids' insurance is different. And I want to make sure that the very first dollars and cents are taken care of so that no one else has to be involved. And I know that they can get the medical care and not have to worry about it. Okay. And not have to worry about fighting over dollars and cents later on. So it's $25,000 per person. Well, how much did that cost? Is a question I get asked. $3.73 a month, or 3/4 of a Starbucks drink. And now it's $150,000 worth of coverage for my family, $1, no matter if I caused the accident or someone else hits me. And if someone else causes the accident, that's a lot of reasons why I should have additional coverage, okay? Something to think about. It's something that many people don't know, that added benefit of MedPay, but when it's used and the money goes back in the patient's pocket, you just incentivize the patient to go that direction, and it helps expedite payment to the hospital as well. UMUIM, something that's unique to Colorado. By the way, the MedPay side of things, I had to explain to my insurance agent. So it's not something that's a lot of common knowledge, even for insurance agents, which is why I didn't know it until I got into this business. UMUIM, something that's interesting. Do any of you know, keeping in mind that auto insurance has been mandated to have on your vehicle for decades. Do any of you know the number by percentage of vehicles in the state of Colorado that do not have any insurance whatsoever? They have zero auto coverage driving up and down I-70 or I-25. You want to type it into that chat box? 70%? Any other guesses? Thankfully, it is 67.5. Anybody want to do one? Price is Right rules. Thankfully, it is not that high. It is 13.3% of the vehicles driving up and down I-25 and I-70 do not have auto insurance. Equates to about 766,000. So it's still a significant number, right? Nationally, that number is 12.6%. So think of it this way. 1 in 8 vehicles that you pass going to and from work don't have any insurance whatsoever. Now, when you add in those that have that minimum coverage, the 25,000, 50,000, right? That number goes up even more. But that's scary. And several have commented that. That is scary. It's a scary thought. So how do you protect yourself? Again, this is personal and professional. UM/UIM. So if I have $100,000 UM/UIM, that helps protect my family should somebody hit us that doesn't have insurance. And if I have multiple vehicles on the same policy, using my family as an example, we have my vehicle, my wife's vehicle, and our daughter's vehicle, all are on the same policy. In Colorado, you're only required to have UM/UIM on one car. So if I have $100,000 in UM/UIM on my policy, it doesn't matter which one of those three vehicles get in an accident, I have $100,000 in coverage. But if I want to take that coverage and say $100,000 doesn't go that far if you're all driving together and somebody hits you that doesn't have insurance, I want to go up to $300,000 in coverage. That premium jump is significant. However, something that's unique to Colorado, if I put $100,000 on my vehicle, $100,000 on my wife's vehicle, and $100,000 on Raina's vehicle, okay, my premium only goes up a fraction. It's like 12 to 15% increase. However, those policies all stack. So now 100, 100, 100 now becomes $300,000, but it cost me a fraction of the money to get there. It's something that's unique to Colorado. So it begs the question, what coverages do you have? A lot of people don't know. When I gave this presentation a little over 3 years ago for Rural Roadshow, I had a lot of people come up to, I think it might have been 4 years ago now. A lot of people came up to me afterwards saying, I need to check. It's something to look at, because if you want to protect your family for that 1 in 8 vehicle passing you every day that doesn't have insurance, this is something that is helpful to know. And that UM/UIM stacking is an inexpensive way to increase your coverage if you have multiple vehicles on the same policy, to be able to cover that. So now we've talked about payer types and a few things that are unique to Colorado. Who do you bill when the accident looks like this? Right? Some of the challenges of these claims is they're just so unique, and being able to decipher who do you bill and when, especially on that previous slide, that picture is extremely difficult. And that's with a picture. But when they come in through your ED, you don't have the luxury of having that picture. So we're going to talk about some of those challenges and how to be able to overcome some of those challenges. So one of the things is identifying those claims can be difficult. Questions to ask. This is why I love working with patient access, because identifying those claims can be difficult. There's a lot of factors at play for patient access, and asking questions and how you ask the question makes all the difference in the world. You know, asking if it's accident related, some of those questions are pretty common, but how you ask the follow-up questions are extremely important. Not just that you are asking them, but how you ask them. So if I'm at patient access, I'm a registrar, and Jessica comes in after an accident. Sorry, Jessica, I'll give you a Starbucks later for using it as an example. She comes in and I start asking questions. If I ask Jessica if she was at fault for the accident, well, that's helpful information to know from a billing perspective, but that was an accusatory question. There's other ways to ask that question. Asking Jessica if the other driver was ticketed for the accident, for example, is a way to get the same information you need, but never put the patient on the defensive. So really working with patient access on questions to ask and how to do so, especially when they don't see auto accidents all the time, really helps to make sure that you're getting information that you need, doing it quickly, and walking through. And I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. EMRs are not designed to handle auto claims. Whether it's Epic, Cerner Community Works, Meditech, you name the EMR, they're not designed to handle auto claims well, especially if you see a patient multiple times. Maybe if you're in a critical access hospital, you also have therapy. Maybe that patient's coming back for multiple visits. Are you able to aggregate all those claims into one spot so that you're giving updated balances to attorneys and adjusters, et cetera, seamlessly? The other one that's a challenge with EMRs, and not just to their design, but to their connectivity, is I've seen hospitals that'll have an EMR for the hospital billing, an EMR for the physician billing, and an EMR for the ambulance billing. Do those talk? Do you have someone working all those claims together? That's a challenge for hospitals, is with those EMRs. Billing requirements vary from payer to payer. That's another one that's interesting. And I'll pick on State Farm for just a minute here because they're a little bit of an easy target on this one. Their requirements vary from payer to payer. Some of them want it secure email, some want it faxed, some still want them dropped to paper. So those requirements vary. But one of the other things that's interesting is State Farm, for example, has about a dozen processing centers around the country. And if you send the claim to the wrong processing center, the response you get back is there's no coverage. Now the patient is fully insured with State Farm, but because it went to the wrong processing center, that's the response you get back. And when you get that back and then you figure out where it needs to go, the right processing center, then by the time you get it out there, those medical payment dollars, it's first come, first served basis, and those dollars are gone. So now you're 90 days out and you're just now getting an answer that there isn't any coverage anyway because it didn't go to the right processing center first. Coordination of benefits and determining liability or percentage of liability is another one that's fun. We'll talk through some coordination of benefits here in Colorado and something that's unique and interesting here from a coordination of benefits standpoint, but also determining liability. The patient that comes into your ED was in an accident, they were turning left on a green and they were T-boned. Who's at fault? Well, the answer is it depends. If they were hit on the front bumper, then there's going to be more fault on the driver that hit them. But if they're hit maybe broadside, it may be 50-50 liability, right? So it depends on, sometimes another factor is percentage of liability, and how does that change? Who do you bill? That's another challenge that these claims create. Not to mention out-of-state rules. How do you handle a patient from Kansas differently than one from Utah? Right? In Kansas, you have personal injury protection or PIP, but unless the patient has filled out paperwork and submitted it, that claim can't be opened. But you also have benefits from, say, Michigan, where you have unlimited PIP. I say unlimited, but it actually was capped at $1 million here about 1.5 years ago. But that's a lot different than California, where they don't really have a first-party benefit. MedPay is an option out there. So there's a lot of uniqueness there with out-of-state rules. So some other challenges, and I promise we're going to get to a better, more fun here in just a minute, but these are some of the challenges that are real. These are things that you, I'm sure, have or are in the middle of experiencing right now. Attorney correspondence and reduction requests. This is always a fun one. Who handles those at your facility? It's probably you. How do you know when the attorney is asking for you to take a reduced payment? Is it legitimate or not? I had an attorney tell me one time that our office wasn't being fair because there was minimal policy of $30,000 in this particular state, and the billed charges were right about $30,000, and we weren't going to reduce the bill for the hospital. And so, well, that doesn't sound right, but he wanted to only pay 10 grand. Found out that there was a UM/UIM policy that he wasn't sharing, but that we had discovered. And so now it was dealing with $130,000 worth of settlement money versus $30,000. And if he could get the hospital to take 10 grand, then he and the client could split the other money. So it's different. How do you know if it's there? Do you know if the attorney's doing a reduction themselves in their fees? Do you know what the other medical bills are? Those are all important to know when you're talking to attorneys. Filing liens, this varies state to state. And using Kansas as an example as well, the rules are different in each county, how you file that lien. So it's important to look at. Here in Colorado, we helped the Secretary of State developing the online platform for filing liens here in the state of Colorado. And it's simple and easy. However, a lot of people are scared of liens. You know, that's a scary thing. And we don't want to lien, patients get education. Are you explaining to a patient what it is and what it is not? It's not against their personal property. It's not against their vehicle. It's a lien against the settlement. So the State Farm, the Allstate, the Geicos of the world have to pay the medical bills before the attorney gets paid and before money gets dispersed elsewhere. That's what it is. Are you taking the time to educate the patient on that? Because if you do, when they get that certified mailing of a lien, in the instance when it's needed, they're less inclined to freak out about it because they understand what it is and what it is not. If you don't do that, freakouts happen and your CFO gets called or you get called. The amount of time and energy it takes for these claims is another key in the challenges that you face, and the length of time to collect. How long is it taking for these claims to settle out? I'll walk through some statistics for where that should be for each one of you here in a couple of slides. That is one that is also a consideration. So we've talked through some things that are unique to Colorado. We talked through the different payer types, and we've talked through some of those challenges. Let's put it into practicality here for a second. Let's look at coordination of benefits. So I've chosen 5 different options here for payers. I've got Cigna as representation of health insurance. You can argue with me whether that's a good representation or not, but Cigna is representing health insurance. Medicare, Medicaid, MedPay, or PIP as represented by USAA for clarity's sake, third-party liability as State Farm, and self-pay. So I'd like to do a little exercise here for the state of Colorado. And in the next 60 seconds, I would like for each of you to put those in order for coordination of benefits for the state of Colorado. And I'm going to ask that someone be brave enough to type that into the chat box and let me know what you think. Who would pay first, second, third, fourth, and fifth, understanding that the patient is probably not going to have every single one of those coverages, but what order would they be in if they were there? So let's take a few seconds, put those in coordination of benefits order for the state of Colorado. All right, someone started out with MedPay. That is correct. What's your guess for number 2? Health insurance. Okay, number 3. That's where we differ here in Colorado. Medicare, Medicaid is number 3. Go ahead with number 4. Number 4 is third party. Number 5 is self-pay. Okay. And I don't see a name on the person who was brave enough to offer those up first, but Jessica, if you could help me identify Vanessa, okay? Vanessa, I would love to be able to send you a Starbucks gift card to say thank you for being brave enough to be the one who put those out there. You're welcome. All right, so why did I have Medicare, Medicaid number 3 and third-party liability 4? Here in the state of Colorado, about 3 years ago, there was a new law that was sent through, and Medicare and Medicaid are considered payers currently. That particular law is now in litigation, and we are monitoring that to see if that will flip back to what's normal nationally. But as of right now, Senate Bill 15-265 made Medicare and Medicaid considered payers. That law was extremely poorly written, and it has a lot of gray area to it, and so it's being litigated right now. But at the end of the day, what happens right now is if you bill out of coordination of benefits rules in Colorado, the way that law is written, you are liable for 2 times the billed charges for every single patient that you billed out of coordination of benefits rules. And I don't have to tell you, with some of the level 1 and level 2 trauma centers here in Colorado, those billed charges per patient can be north of 7 figures. So take the number of patients and the dollars that you've billed multiplied by 2, and that's the class action lawsuit that currently could be yours in this state, depending on how this litigation goes down. Okay, so that's something that's unique to Colorado. Now, let's go ahead and look at Utah and Wyoming. We'll do the same thing. We're going to put those in order for Utah, Wyoming. And what's different, what's the same? Utah is a PIP state, Wyoming being a MedPay state, but they do function similarly. So I've used those two here. So we'll take 60 seconds here, or 45 if you will, and would love to have someone answer for Utah, Wyoming. And I'll watch the chat box to see who was brave enough to start offering who's first, second, and third. Okay, MedPay first, correct. Who's second? Any takers? Health insurance is second. Third-party liability is third. Medicare, Medicaid would be fourth, and self-pay is fifth. This is how most of you probably thought the first one would be. Now, just for grins, let's do Montana. What's the same, what's different? Any guesses as who's first in Montana? All right, looks like Vanessa is still saying MedPay. Any other guesses out there? Anyone else on here that wants to guess? And by the way, while we're waiting for that answer, like MedPay, which is first come, first serve, I only have a Starbucks gift card for Vanessa, who answered on the Colorado side. Because if you don't get out there quickly, you don't get the benefit, okay? Montana. The only thing I'm seeing here is MedPay. Third-party liability can pay first in Montana. And MedPay as well. While those can pay, either one of them can pay as first response, it depends on the coverage that the patient has. Third-party a lot of times pays faster than MedPay in the state of Montana, followed by health insurance, then Medicare, Medicaid, and then self-pay. And I bring all that up because every state functions a little bit differently, and it's important to know what those look like. So let's talk about the significance of patient access. Why focus on patient access training? What is it about that that is important in the MBA side of things? It improves the patient experience. As I mentioned before, if you ask accusatory questions, it puts patients on the defensive. It expedites that registration process, being able to figure out the different details that you need in a high volume environment. There is a high turnover of patient access staff. And if you don't have ongoing education to patient access staff, it's easy to forget what to look for and be able how to find those particular patients. 50%, as you know, of a UB04 is populated patient access, so it's important to get it right up front. And it reduces the account touches to payment. That's an extremely important one in MBA. Like I said, with MedPay being an example, or PIP, those dollars are first come, first served. If you don't get out there quickly, you're not going to get access to that money. It's different than health insurance, where you can treat 5 times in a year and you're always going to get paid off your fee schedule. With auto, once that $5,000 or $25,000 in my family's instance is gone, it's gone. There is no more money to go back to the well for. It increases the ability to collect, as I'll show you an example here in just a second, and it expedites payments. So all of that is important with patient access training, and many times that isn't a focus of MVA claims. And believe that that has significant impact, as we'll show right here. So this is a 25-bed critical access hospital. They were spending a disproportionate amount of time on the claims, and they were having some difficulty. This is what patient access training can do. They were seeing about 4 patients a month on average, a little over $5,000 a month in collections, $65,000 a year in collections roughly. And with patient access training, their identification went up to 10 patients a month, collected almost $19,000 a month for $225,000 for the year. So 147% increase in identification, almost 250% increase in revenue. Now, did they just start seeing more MBA patients? No. And I'll let each of you do the math on how many hours that extra 6 patients of reworking claims because they didn't go to the right insurance company first would have cost your facility. It's significant. In addition to having an extra $160,000 coming in to the bottom line of the hospital. I was out at Region 8, HFMA Region 8 last year, and the last day they had a CFO panel. There were 5 different CFOs, all from critical access hospitals. And one stat that stuck with me was $100,000 to all 5 of them was the difference of being in the red or being in the black each year. It's significant. And when you look at a holistic approach of these accounts, even though it's maybe 1% of your overall volume, the revenue opportunity is significant, perhaps the tipping point between being in the red or being in the black. And those are just payments from auto payers alone. That doesn't factor in health insurance, government, self-pay in addition. Those are just auto payments. So you're like, well, my facility is maybe a little bit different size. So here's a single level 3 trauma center. And they implemented tools and training in January. And their identification went up 18%. Their revenue went up over 20%. And that was over a $250,000 swing. And that's in addition to the amount of rework on the back end from PFS that wasn't having to take place. The patient financial services folks weren't having to go back and do rebilling. They weren't touching those claims multiple times. So there's some significant benefit in involving your patient access team in these claims. Any questions, by the way? I know Jessica said that we'd take questions along the way. Any questions with that?
Nothing's been submitted so far.
Okay.
Warren.
All right. I really just wanted to highlight how there's, whether it's a small facility of critical access or whether it's a level 3 trauma center, or even if you go up higher than that with a health system, the benefits that are available in having a very specific approach to MBA accounts is significant. So let's talk about some of the takeaways for today. These claims are complex. A lot of them have multiple different payers that could pay through that stage to get those accounts to zero. The coverages and benefits do benefit from state to state. They are significantly different in some instances. The challenges that you're facing are significant and resources are limited. And now even more so for some with a lot of the layoffs that are happening due to COVID, or the furloughs that are happening due to COVID. You're having to do even more with less. Training for patient access is extremely important, and it needs to be ongoing as that position turns over. What is the strategy for making sure that they're brought up to speed on something that's a small sliver but has significant financial benefit for the hospital? However, as shown in those couple examples, MBA claims really are worth the focus, not just from a monetary perspective, but also from a patient experience perspective. So what will your strategy be? Here's a couple questions that I want to leave you with today. What's your strategy going to be? Do you have the resources needed to handle these claims with excellence? Are you investing in that? Do you have dedicated staff that's just handling these claims, because it's different than handling claims through commercial payers? Can you provide that ongoing training for patient access? Do you have the technology to make up for the deficiencies of EMRs? How are you handling that, especially from a physician billing side, hospital billing, maybe even ambulance together? What is that looking like for your organization? And do you have the legal knowledge to handle those attorney questions that come in and understanding whether or not you should give a reduction or not give a reduction? And do you have benchmarks to be able to make sure that you're hitting certain metrics? Couple of questions for you on those benchmarks. Do more than 80% of your MVA claims pay out and close without needing secondary billing. Do more than 85% of your claims that come through in a calendar year resolve in that same calendar year? That should be a reality. Those things can happen when there is an approach to these claims that is the right way of doing it, in my point of view. So with that, I'll say thank you for your time today and open it up for any specific questions that you have for me. Don't everybody ask them at once.
Thank you so much, Warren. If anybody has any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat box or the Q&A box, whatever is easier for you. There's also a little button at the bottom of your screen that will allow you to raise your hand. I can unmute you and you can ask your question in person, whatever you need to do. Some great information out there, Warren. Thank you.
You're welcome. Hopefully you've all have learned something that you can use not only in your shop, but also that you can use on a personal level as well.
It looks like we don't have any additional questions right now. The great news is Warren has given you all of his information right here on the screen. So if any of you have any questions that come up, I'm sure he would be absolutely happy to answer them for you, even if it's something more specific to your experiences. I'm sure he'd be happy to help. So with that, thank you so much. This was the first in our summer webinar series. We hope that you will be able to join us in the future. I'm going to pop up on here some of our upcoming webinars. Our next one is July 8th, and that's going to be engaging patients and addressing their financial concerns from a distance. Following that, we've got actually an excellent CHFP exam prep course. So if any of you are interested in becoming certified or have considered becoming certified, this is a great exam prep course. It's actually taught by Dr. Jeff Houghton, who is on the Board of Examiners for the CHFP certification. So an excellent course there. After that will be July 22nd, and that's our next in the summer webinar series, and that will be focusing on patient interactions and payment trends amidst this pandemic and these crazy times we're in. Thank you all so much for sharing your lunch hour with us. Warren, we appreciate your time and your specific expertise. We certainly hope to see you all again soon.
Thank you, Jessica. Thank you all.